This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cavins.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast. We have another draft podcast installment with Kevin Field. Sorry, I always want to add the S, Kevin. I'm sorry about that. The NFL draft analyst for BSJ. Kevin's been doing a great job all year. He had a very strong podcast debut, so we had to quickly bring him back before he starts traveling the globe and closing all sorts of big business deals for his business. But Kevin, how we doing? Did you survive the initial foray into the podcast?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'm happy to be back. Happy to be talking to the listeners today. Enjoyed the first chat, and I'm glad it had a strong reaction. It's great.
Yeah, I think we're talking about we sort of founded BSJ on the principles of New England people doing work for New England people, and I think you and I, people saw pretty quickly that we have a pretty good rapport. We're just, a couple of New England guys who like football and we like talking football. And, Kevin's a master of an area where I'm weak. I've never been strong in the draft. I readily admit this. I'm too busy during the football season with the team I'm covering to really worry about the draft. I like the draft, and I'm certainly catching up, thanks in part to Kevin's work. But, Kevin is the expert around here. I think he's doing a really good job, and he knows what he's looking for. Kevin, we sort of did an overview on the last podcast. Let's sort of look at the offensive side of the ball. I know you haven't gotten to all your draft capsules in terms of, I think you still have running backs and maybe quarterbacks, which, I think you're sort of leaving some of these till the end because not the biggest needs, even though I do think running back is, I wouldn't be surprised if they came out with a running back or at least a undrafted free agent running back, considering Damian Harris is going into the final year of his deal, I think. They have Ramondre Stevenson, so no reason to overextend. They flirted maybe kind of with Leonard Fournette in the offseason, which I think sort of speaks to Damian Harris's contract status. They have, James White's coming back from the hip. No one knows what they're going to get out of him. They have J.J. Taylor, sort of an enigma that we're waiting to bust out. So we will touch on the running backs and a little bit on the quarterbacks. I'll be interested to hear if Kevin's got a prospect, sort of like, the next Garoppolo or next Jarrett Stidham, like the next guy, if they're not enamored with Jarrett Stidham in this training camp. Maybe they bring in another guy to sort of could be the eventual backup to Mac Jones, that sort of thing. But, Kevin, let's start with offense in general. Give us a big picture sort of overview of this offensive talent class. What do you think of it overall? Where is it deep? Where is it a little skinny on, top tier talent? What are sort of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. So it's a deep draft overall, but of course there's pockets that are deeper than others. So let's cover the positions quickly, and then we can dive deeper throughout the rest of the podcast. Quarterback, not deep. There's maybe 3 QBs that go round 1, and candidly, they're going to get overdrafted because of the position. Then there's another 3 guys there that will get drafted probably in the second, third round, and then there's a cliff, right? And so it's not even a great draft if you're looking for late round depth pick, which the Pats could potentially be looking to bring somebody in like that. Running back has good depth. I would say that there's not one first rounder. It's really an eye of the beholder type draft, but like I would say I have different rankings of the top 5 running backs than maybe somebody that you might read like a Kuiper or Mache. But there's plenty of kids out there that day 2, day 3 that can contribute at the next level. Not necessarily all pros, but certainly players that can contribute. I think when we talk about the running backs, we should probably actually dive a little deeper on the pass catching running backs.
Yep.
There's 4 or 5 kids there that I think will be available in the middle rounds and could contribute to the Pats. Wide receiver depth, right? Just how the college game and the pro games have evolved. There's value on both outside and inside receivers. I think we all agree that that's probably an area the Patriots try to target at some point if the board breaks right for them. Tight end is not a good top end class. Like we saw Kyle Pitts last year, all pro type potential talent. You're not going to see that in this class, but you will see in that middle tier. There's a lot of guys. There's probably more tight ends that will get drafted this year than in most years, but there's just not someone that's going to go in probably the first 45 picks. And I think that's a place unlikely the Patriots focus there, but could happen given the position is not settled. And then tackle, couple cliffs. But it's probably 6 guys that we'll see in the top 45. And then there's a couple guys that I like in that next to later. But if they're going to go get tackle, you ideally want to get a tackle early. I would say in this draft. Guard, there's 2 guys that can land in the first. Some depth there. They could go earlier, but the guard is a position that you can land a contributor in day 3 if they like the player a lot. And then center class is weak. There's a potential first rounder, and then there's a drop off in talent. So if somebody really needs a center, they're probably going a round higher than they normally would based off of talent. Patriots don't really necessarily have that need with Bear Andrews in the middle.
That's weird. It seems like, and I'm sort of losing my place as far as I remember the year that is it Cesar Ruiz, who the Saints drafted, who I think plays now guard. I remember that year because I think Andrews was going into a contract year, and maybe and he was also coming off the illness. And I remember writing they might need to address center, and it was like, all right, there's I saw 2 real centers in the draft, and I don't know how last year was. I don't recall. Now this year, man, it's weird. They don't. Sort of a desert as far as centers go in college football, which is weird. Let's start off with the tackles because I think we've all sort of settled on the Patriots need to draft a tackle in this draft. That would be nice. We'll skip over Neal and Ekwonu from NC State. Those guys are going top 10, if not top 5, for sure. And then, we touched on these guys, but the potential first rounders, if the Patriots were to get one at 21 or possibly trade up a little bit, you're talking Charles Cross from Mississippi State, Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa, who they had in for a top 30 visit, and Bernard Raymond from Central Michigan. You're talking about, Cross is 6'5", Penning 6'6", Raymond 6'6". We're talking about some big dudes here, huh, Kev?
Yeah, really, really big kids. Charles Cross, last year he showed flashes of brilliance baked with inconsistency. That's how I would describe him last year. This year, he really cleaned up. He was a lot more consistent. He's great at pass blocking. I referenced that in the pod that we did last time. He had 16 pressures on 719 snaps, right? Only 1 sack. So the kid's a really good pass protector that you could put on the left side. He's nimble out there. He's a good athlete. He's really good at mirror, really good at anchor. He's got the strength to stunt defenders. I think that he'll need some work in the run game, but you're drafting a left tackle out that high to protect Mac, right? If you feel that he's the guy. Mm-hmm. The best comparison I think I have for him is probably Laramie Tunsil, the kid that plays for the Texans. And Tunsil was picked, I think, around 12. I think he actually dropped. But he's a same type of a player that could fit into that mold. And so you'd feel good if you got Cross. And some people think Cross could end up dropping to within the range. The Pats might have to move up to get him, but would be within range.
I think, Penning, both Penning and Raymond, but they both fit sort of what the Patriots, look for in terms of athletic ability, some versatility. Raymond was a, tight end when he came into college. He's from Austria, giving off strong Sebastian Vollmer vibes, Nate Solder type vibes. What do you think about those two guys? And what do you think? Do you think Raymond goes in the first round, or could he possibly be available in the second? I mean, but I think some people are expecting a run on tackles at some point in the first round.
I agree. There's probably a run on tackles. If there's one that slips, it's probably going to be Raymond. But he needs some work on, he's a good athlete. As you referenced, he was a tight end. He's from Austria, excuse me. And he's a tight end. He came in, he's put on some strength. He's good in the run game. He needs to improve his technique, but he's got good feet and he'll get some bulk in the NFL program. So I think he's a top 50 guy. Then you factor in that everybody needs tackles, right?
Yep.
Half the NFL needs a tackle. And so I think that he's likely to go towards the end of the first, top of the second. But he's another guy that only allowed 10 pressures. I think he was conference offensive player of the year, which is rare for a tackle. The one thing I would call out on Raymond, he's only got 18 starts at left tackle, and he's going to be 25 by the time the season starts. So he's a little bit of an older guy. That's something to be aware of as you're drafting for, future franchise left tackle. Penning's the guy that's going to put his hands on you and he's going to move you. He is a better athlete than I think people are giving him credit for, just because he comes from Northern Iowa, lower division. One thing I would call out with Penning, as you think about making the jump, he's played left tackle. He's got like over 30 career starts over there for Northern Iowa. The kid that was the right tackle for Northern Iowa last year was Spencer Brown, who was drafted by the Bills and was able to contribute as a rookie, right? So if you think of a barometer of making the jump, Brown was able to make the jump, and I do think Penning will be able to make the jump.
One guy, you also over at BSJ for your draft capsules, which I think is the best part of what you do, is you give potential Patriots fits by each round. You have round 2, the Ohio State kid, summer size, 6'6". Sort of talk to me about him and what kind of potential he has.
Yeah, there's 2 kids that round 2 could be available for them if they stay at 54, and Nicholas Petit-Frere is one of them. He's the left tackle for Ohio State. He's got the prototypical left tackle frame. He's got the athleticism that you can feel comfortable putting out on the island there. Teams will have to get comfortable. His last tape that he had out there, he got beat badly by the Michigan ends, by Ajabo and by Hutchinson. And he had a poor game against Penn State, which has another kid that's going to get drafted. And so there's, some concerns that how he did against top competition. If you watch the rest of his tape, though, he was very, very, very effective. He started there for a long time. They actually had the left tackle that was a 3-year starter previously, moved over to guard to move Petit-Frere over to left tackle this year. So that tells you what Ryan Day and his staff thought about him. I think he's a potential. He's going to need some work, but he's a potential kid that could be a first-round talent. You just got to get comfortable with what happened with him in those 2 games, and that's something that I'm sure the Patriots are digging into. The other guy I would focus on, Greg, or want everyone to be aware of, is Tyler Smith from Tulsa. He's their left tackles. He's one of the better run blocking tackles in the draft. I would say he's almost like Ike Ekwonu, like a mini version of Ike Ekwonu, in the sense that Ike's going to go in the top 5. Tyler Smith's, a really, really strong run blocker. You could play him at guard next year and then get comfortable with him and move him out to left. And that might be how the Patriots are thinking about his evaluation. Right. I have, if you played him at left tackle, I have some Greg Robinson vibes, which I don't love. Right. Yep. But he's a power run blocker. The one thing where I think he falls to the second round, he's got too many penalties. He had 16 last year. And that's something that of course the Patriots don't love. So, but he's a guy to also keep an eye on. And then there starts to be that cliff. Yeah.
What's interesting that you brought up about Petit-Frere in terms of his matchup against draftable guys. One tidbit for people, Bill Belichick and his people absolutely put a premium on watching film with guys against, guys, how they played against guys who are currently in the league or will be in the league. They put a humongous emphasis on that. So maybe that's not the greatest news for Petit-Frere. If there's a guy sort of later on, Kevin, at tackle that, has a lot of upside that the Patriots might look at and say, all right, well, this he needs a lot of work, but the potential's there, or he needs a lot of work, or maybe he's injured, like we saw like Yadni Kajust when they drafted him didn't they draft him in the 3rd round? Holy cow. In the 3rd round, he was injured coming out of West Virginia, but the film was really good. I see why they drafted him there. Hasn't worked out yet, even though I still think he has potential. The kid has, when he played last year, he showed really good feet, and I know he opened eyes on the Patriots coaching staff. He's still very raw and needs a lot of work, but I think they were impressed by what he did last year, even though I'm sure a lot of fans watched him play and, he gave up like a sack and a couple other things, and people are like, oh, this guy sucks. But the bones were there. Is there a guy later on that you say, all right, if they were making a future bet upside, who would the guy be?
Yeah. One guy I love is Dare Rosenthal from Kentucky. He's, 6'7". He was a lot lighter than he should have been, I think, at the combine. Showed tons of athleticism, but he was 290. So he's got to play it closer to 320, 325, which he has been in the past. But he's the type of guy that I want a left tackle that you can put out there on the island. Big guy, long arms. That's the ideal frame if you're drafting a development prospect. And I always thought, watching him, Kennard is another kid from another tackle from Kentucky that gets a lot of press. And I always thought he was better than Kennard. He's got good agility. He's good on the move. One thing for the Patriots that they will know, they will dig into it, may take him off their board, is he had rule violations at LSU that forced them to suspend him at one point, and then he left LSU. So he might actually be off their board. But the tape and what I see, I like him. 3 of the guys, I won't go into the same depth, but Luke Tenuta from Virginia Tech, 6'8", 320. Father was a coach for 40 years. He's got the length, the smarts, the awareness. Obina Easy from TCU, 6'6", 321. And then there's a couple other guys, Vidarian Lowe and Zach from Illinois, and Zach Tom from Wake Forest. Those are guys that could be late depth pieces that you could move around the line of scrimmage, guard, center, even if you needed to.
At guard, I don't see the Patriots. I would have a hard time seeing them taking one at 21. Now, could I see them if they trade out of 21 and sort of to the bottom of the first, top of the second sort of thing? Could I see them, going with a guard then? Yeah, I could. When you're talking about that sort of lower end of the first round, I assume you're talking, Kenyon Green from Texas A&M and the local kid, Boston College, Zion Johnson. I think you prefer Green a little bit more. Can you sort of discuss those two guys? And, do you think both will be on the radar for the Patriots?
I think both will be on the radar. I agree with your assessment of how they would evaluate a guard. You can go back from 21 if you want to get one of those guys. They're close, a little bit of the eye of the beholder. I like Green a little bit more because he's bigger. He's got 35 career starts in the SEC. He might even actually have over 40 career starts. He's really good again on the run. He's a power blocker. He's an athletic guy. He's played all over the line of scrimmage. And so that's something the SEC coaches, voted him all conference a number of times. I compare him to Elijah Vera Tucker from the Jets. I think that's probably good comp for him. Zion is a great kid. Zion's a kid that's going to fit in the locker room really well. He's well built. He's shorter. He's only 6'2", 312, but he's thick and that base is strong. He's got a lot in the trunk there. BC played him at guard, then moved him out to tackle, then back to guard. The best comp for Zion, I think, is Shaq Mason. And, good athlete. He's a learner. He's a leader. He took snaps at center at the Senior Bowl just so teams could see him do that. Teams loved him at the Senior Bowl. He's going to win an interview. He's got almost 3,000 career snaps. Like he's a kid that the teams love, partly because of his personality.
So when we get into, sort of later rounds, probably, prime time, area for the Patriots, if they say, we need a better guard option. I mean, they have Yasir Durant, who they traded for last year. I don't really see Justin Herron as a guard. I think he's mostly a tackle. I thought they could have gotten by with him at right tackle, but they brought back Trent Brown. We have Durant. I don't think he's a guy that they want to give. They don't want to cross-train Durant. He's got enough. I think that I could see him being the main backup at right tackle, sort of trying to develop him because you never know what you're going to get out of Trent Brown. Train Justin Herron as the backup at left tackle because you go with those two tackles, you better have options and guys ready and trained up because you don't know when they're going to be on the field. So I think they're a little bit. I mean, they got the guy from the CFL. I don't know if I don't know. You're a nerd. You're a talent nerd. You probably no. You didn't watch any film on the CFL guy. Come on. You're gonna have to cut
so many hours in a day.
Yeah, I know. But Drew Desjardins or something, and then some guy named Arlington Hambright, and then of course they have the William Sherman kid who they drafted last year, who was god awful in training camp. They cut him. They brought him back on the practice squad. You never know. Yes, he was god awful as a rookie, but you never know. Guys improve, and sometimes they need a reset. So we'll take a look at young William Sherman in OTAs and stuff like that and see if, maybe he's popped in a year. That happens with these guys. You don't write off these young kids too quickly. If the Patriots were looking to plug left guard later on in the draft, whether it's, third, the fifth round or what have you, who are guys that who's a couple guys that you look at and you say, I see Patriots guy?
Yeah, totally. So if they go a couple guys that late second, third that they would look at, I won't dive as deep on, but Sean Ryan from UCLA, he played left tackle, but he's a guard at the next level. When I watched him play, and I kept thinking Matt Light came to mind. Ed Ingram, who's a guard, played a lot in the SEC at LSU, and Jemery Salyer, he was left tackle, a very similar build to Isaiah Wynn, and he'll be a guard at the next level. Those are guys that are going to be, I think, guys that they'll do a deeper dive on. If we're talking day three guys, two guys I would call up Marquise Hayes from Oklahoma. I think he's a guy that lands somewhere on between 4 and 6. But he's a big kid, 6'5", 318, good combination of size and athleticism. And he's a true guard when he gets his hands on you. He's blocking you. It's as simple as that. Needs some technique and body control issues, I think, that need to get cleaned up.
Let me ask you a question real quick. If they move Owenu to right guard or one of the guard spots, which we think they're going to do. I mean, Owenu's good. He's got good feet for a big kid. But to me, they really lack a puller type, a really good puller, a really athletic guy who can get downhill and sort of blow people up. Is there a guy that sort of stands out to you in that regard?
Yeah, there's this kid, Luke Godecki. I don't know if I'm getting his last name right, but also from Central Michigan, played tackle opposite Raymond. He's a former tight end at the D3 level, and then he moved up to Central Michigan. But because of his arm, the thoughts he's going to be a guard, and he'll put on some more bulk. But he's a guy that's athletic. Another move guy that if you're thinking about, hey, we want a guy that is good in the screen game, good on the run. Dylan Parham from Memphis is another guy who was a tight end, defensive end, moved to O-line, and is athletic. Those guys inherently. The kid from Central Michigan isn't short, but typically those guys tend to be a little bit shorter, which the Patriots have been comfortable before, right? Mm-hmm. Shaq Mason is 6'1". So, definitely part of their evaluation is somebody that can block on the move.
So Kevin, I've started to tip my toe into the draft waters, and I've, started with receiver because I do think the Patriots have some interest in getting somebody. And we talked about they don't have any receivers signed by 2023. Yeah. And, you would love to have a guy that you can bring in with Mac Jones and sort of pair him with him. I wanted to ask you, because I was listening to Chris Sims's podcast the other day, and he had his top 5. He's often unorthodox, but I think he's pretty good at what he does, and he knows what he's looking at in terms of talent. I found it very interesting, and I wanted to get your reaction, that Chris Olave is sort of like a, borderline top 5 type of guy in terms of at the receiver position. But he didn't have Garrett Wilson on his top 5. I think Jameson Williams from Alabama was by far his number 1. Of course, he's coming off the ACL. But I know or at least in your mock drafts, you've had Garrett Wilson going high. Just sort of I wanted to get your quickie thoughts on that. And he likes Drake London was in his top 5. I don't think he's the biggest fan of Drake London, but he had a couple other guys that surprised me. Like Watson from North Dakota. He's also high on Burks. I saw Burks at the combine. I was in his workout. I was not impressed by Traylon Burks. He did not stand out to me. So.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with Chris a little bit, right? So I think that Garrett Wilson, for me, he's a 3-level threat. So he's quick on short routes. He needs some route running refinement, but I think he can be a good route runner, which is going to help as intermediate. And he's got plenty of speed. So in good body control, elite ability to separate. So when he catches the football, like we talk about Jameson Williams, who is an absolute, not only does Jameson Williams have great speed, but he has great burst, which creates like that lethal combination, right? Garrett Wilson has a great burst as well. And keep in mind, Garrett Wilson started over Jameson Williams at Ohio State previously. So,
Wait, hang on. Let's also point out, just for the sake of balance here, that who was the kid who just died? The quarterback from Ohio State. Dwayne Haskins started over Joe Burrows, and he had to transfer to LSU. So let's just point that out, that maybe Urban Meyer and his cats don't exactly do the best evaluations.
Fair. I think that the comparison I use to Garrett Wilson is Santonio Holmes. And the comparison I use for Jameson Williams is slightly bigger Deshaun Jackson, right? And so both those guys could certainly help the Patriots. I have nothing against Jameson Williams. I think his talent's obvious. I also like Jahan Dotson from Penn State. I would put him in the top 5, especially for what the Patriots try to do. Drake London, I like. I mean, he's a possession guy. Allen Robinson, I think at his ceiling, maybe a Brandon LaFell at his floor. So you got to figure out how he runs. I think he has his pro day coming up. I'm a little lower on Traylon Burks than maybe most people. I wouldn't
agree with you.
As a first rounder. I think the ideally people say, well, he's Deebo Samuel. Well, he might be Laviska Shenault from the Jags. And he might not even be that good, I think, at that next level. I think, how he translates to the next level, I think is difficult. Arkansas spent a lot of time getting him the football in positions where he could use his athleticism. He's a big kid. He's a very likable kid. I think he's going to interview well and all of that, but he's not like the burner that people are going to think. He's got some good acceleration and he's a good player, but I don't think he's a first rounder. I wouldn't be thrilled if the Pats went with him in the first round. And I'm not as high on Olave as some other people. I think Olave is a good wide receiver number 2. And if they pick Olave, you just got to be comfortable with him being a wide receiver number 2, which is all right if that's how you evaluate it. I think if they're going wide receiver round 1, you're hopefully drafting a wide receiver 1, right? And I think that's just how I evaluate it.
Don't do another N'Keal Harry thing. Was like, all right, he's a tweener. Like, at his best, he's probably a number 1, but I think that's sort of the debate that you're having in terms of a wide receiver in round 1. Like, did N'Keal Harry have enough upside to go in round 1? I think the answer is decidedly no.
Yep. And look what the Bengals did last year with Chase is he's an all pro talent, right? But then you see, Tyreek Hill obviously he had issues, but he wasn't going to be a top of the draft guy, right? And then you look on the other side, you got Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. Those guys, Robert obviously was out for the Super Bowl, and the Rams didn't draft Beckham, but those, Cooper Kupp was a third rounder. Deebo Samuel was a second rounder. Even Devontae Adams, those guys are second rounders. So those guys can be had later in the draft. And if you're picking a guy wide receiver 1 in the draft, or draft 1, the first round, I think you gotta look at them as a wide receiver 1.
Let's talk for a guy who, I heard Sims talk about him. I've texted some people around the league, and there seems to be some excitement about him. You saw him in person at the Senior Bowl. Christian Watson from North Dakota, big kid, I hear he's great on 50-50 balls, can also get explosion after the catch as well. What did I'm a big believer in sort of the eye test and do they pop? And, what do you think of Watson? What did you see out of him at the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, I wrote this after the Senior Bowl. He passes the eye test, and that's the big thing for him going down to Mobile is how does he match up against other players that are going to play in the league? And for my money, he was the best player in Mobile, best wide receiver in Mobile. I put him in the mock draft, the second mock draft we had at the end of round 1. So, I think there are some commentators that said, you're crazy. Watson's never going to go that high. I think he could. He's 6'4", almost 210, and he runs under a 4.4. Like that's kind of rare attributes. And he looked good running other routes than just the deep ball, right? That's the thing with sometimes you get people with those traits, but they can just run certain deep routes. And he did a good job, I thought, with his routes and being consistent all week.
When we get into other guys, beyond round 1, one guy who's popular right now because the Patriots just had him as a top 30 visit, who at BSJ, you called him almost too obvious a pick for the Patriots. And I kind of agree with you. John Mechie from Alabama. First of all, when did he get the ACL? Like, when did he sustain the injury? Any idea on sort of the timetable on him? And, I agree with you. I think if the Patriots take a receiver, it's going to be Mechie somewhat earlier. Where do you think they're going to need to get him? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think Mechie will be available at 54. I think there's actually a chance that Mechie falls into the 75 range and is available there. You're getting a little risky when you get around that range, but he'll be there 50 to 75, and so they have the 54th pick in the second round. So Mechie, I think, will be available for them. One of the things I loved about
Kevin, real quick. I mean, that's like knowing the Patriots, and if they are targeting saying like a Mechie like guy, that's another reason why you trade down. Like you trade down from 21, which is probably borderline where people have first round evaluations on guys. You trade down, you pick up another pick, and then you're like, all right, because I'm a big proponent of, and I think Jimmy Johnson told this to, I don't know if it was Nick Saban or Bill Belichick or maybe both of them, but Jimmy Johnson used to say, hey, this is what you should do. You should, first of all, accumulate a bunch of picks and then write down on the piece of paper the players you have to have in this draft, and then sort of use your picks and manipulate the draft that way. And if I'm the Patriots and I'm saying like I want a Mechie and maybe we can get a tackle at the end of the first, and then with the other picks, trading up for a Mechie, keeping it open and making sure you get that guy because he does have a relationship with Mac Jones. Jameson Williams does not, even though, let me just add, because I don't really think we're going to talk about him, because I don't think they have a shot in hell at Jameson Williams. Even him coming off the ACL in the national championship game, he probably won't play much at all this year, maybe towards the end of the year. But to me, he's at the most, he's going 15th or, somewhere in that range. He's not getting by 15. He might be a top 10 pick. I would not be surprised if somebody takes him in the top 10. He's that good. But I think that Mechie is a guy that if you wanted to link up Mac Jones with a guy for the next 5 years, 10 years, it would be Mechie. And I think that that's being able to manipulate the draft that way, that's Bill Belichick sort of getting back to who he's been and when they've been at their best.
I 100% agree with that. One of the knocks on the mock draft that I had that I would actually agree with is I didn't have a wide receiver. Right. And that's just how the board played out when I was making those picks. They won't let that happen to them. That's where they'll leverage the picks to go up. And if they see somebody that they like, they'll go get them or move back to get capital and then use that capital. One of the things I liked about Mechie is talking to Roger McCreary at the Senior Bowl, who's the cornerback from Auburn, who I also like. And I asked him, who's the best player that you faced this year? And he said, John Mechie. You know, he was a competitor. He's a dog out there. And we just went at each other's throat. And he's I had a lot of respect. And of course that's playing at a high level of competition. And he played against Jameson Williams, right? That he was on the other side of the field. So I like Mechie. He's a good, solid player. He could be challenged with some, physical corners given his size, but he's very competitive, great work ethic. I think he's a good pick. The other kind of slot guys that I like, I start to get into, Wendell Robinson from Kentucky. He's got a little bit of Percy Harvin to him, I think. And they'd have to, use him as a weapon. Not the biggest cat, but, he broke over 20 tackles last year, over 100 catches. He's a really good player. Kyle Phillips is kind of another obvious pick. I was hoping he was flying under the radar a little bit more than I think he probably will end up getting picked. He was really dominating.
Kelly connection.
Yeah, and he's got he dominated at the Shrine Bowl. I don't even think he played in the game, but the word out of the practices was he was just dominating. Good footwork, good after the catch, first team all Pac-12, can return punts. He fits a lot of boxes that they like to check at that slot position. Not the fastest guy, right? But they don't need the fastest guy at that slot role. They need a guy that can get open. And I think he allows them to do that. And then there's, some other guys like Khalil Shaker, Dontario Drummond, players like that I also like. Khalil should hopefully be available in round 4. He's a guy that I'm sure that they're doing a deep dive on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, I'm hoping that it comes to an end here, Kevin, but I've been saying for 2 years, the draft is deep with receivers and the Patriots don't come out with anybody. But you just look at these guys, whether it's, Mechie or Sky Moore or Wandale Robinson or Shaker or Kyle Phillips. And then, you even have a guy like, Bo Melton from Rutgers, George Pickens from Georgia, sort of an iffy guy, but, we know how Bill feels about Georgia guys. And if he gets the word from Kirby Smart, there are guys just all over this draft. Undrafted guys, not Slade Bolden. I am not, he ends up here as an undrafted free agent, but I was in his workout at the combine. I did not think anything of him. He did not hold his own, but it's just, this draft is just littered with Patriots type of receivers, guys who you think have a chance to really pop here and could really boost the athletic, quotient on this offense, down the road, especially with, like we said, no receivers signed past 2023. This would be a perfect year for them to double dip at receiver sort of in the middle rounds where you can get 2 different types of receivers and develop them with Mac Jones. I almost want to start weeping because it's just dude, Bill, just take 2 of these guys and give them to Mac and let's see how they grow. The Brady days are over where Brady, would give the guy the stink eye and you never hear from him again. Mac is a different dude. He's going to work with these guys tirelessly to bring them along, even if they're struggling. They have to get 1 or 2 guys out of this draft, don't they, Kevin?
I think so. I think they'll get probably 1 in the draft, and then you're going to see them target some guys undrafted. You referenced Sky Moore. The comp for him in my mind is Golden Tate. Really good after comp. Yeah, he's I think he broke more tackles last year than any wide receiver, and the kid's 5'9", so he plays really strong, just like Golden did. And the deeper wide receiver or deep threat wide receiver that could develop that I like on day 3. You referenced Bo Melton from Rutgers. I do like Bo. I also like Danny Gray from SMU. And he's a guy I think that people should keep an eye on. My binky, there's 3 or 4 guys that I really like for them, as a priority free agent. As you know, I referenced him before the Rose Bowl. Britton Covey he's like a Patriots wide receiver that they absolutely will. Hopefully he agrees to sign, but he had over 2,000 career return yards, was 5-time all Pac-12. His problem is he's 5'8", 170. He's smaller than me, right? And me walking out on an NFL field, hopefully I survive a hit, right? And so I think that Britton is he had a lot of
returns kicks too. Right? He'd be like a perfect gunner replacement.
I think that's exactly right. That's what I was just going to go with. He replaces Gunner if they don't replace anybody else with the draft that has that return experience. When I watched him, I just kept thinking that's Braxton Berrios.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, let's finish up here. I don't really think we need to get into the tight ends, and you just wrote them up the other day. You have the local kid, Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina. Let's go with your running backs with pass catching upside, guys that they might see as a replacement for James White.
Yeah, so there's 5 guys that I like. I'll kind of leave it there. The first guy I think that goes off the board is James Cook from Georgia. He split time with Zeus White, who I also like from Georgia, who was their early down back. James was their third down back. Name's familiar. It's because his brother's Dalvin plays for the Vikings. He runs with the same style. He's not as big or as cut up as and plays with the same strength that his brother does, Dalvin. But this kid is a weapon out of the backfield. He could almost be like a wide receiver with his hands. And so, you get him the ball in space and definitely a difference maker. I think this offense can use that. I think when this offense has been at its peak, they've had, elite third down backs that get you first downs and can get extra yards. And so each of these next guys, I think, give you that element. The second guy,
way, Kevin, don't let's not make the same mistake from Georgia again and take the Sony Michel to Chubb. Can we not do that? You start saying Georgia running backs and splitting time type of thing, and I'm having flashbacks. I just had to say that.
That's totally fair, and agreed. I think we all have that same tinge of sadness. The second guy I like is Kyron Williams from Notre Dame. He ran a slow 40, but I don't actually, James White probably doesn't impress in the 40. Right. Kevin Falk wouldn't impress in the 40. He's not very big. He's only 5'9", 195, but man, is he a tough player. He broke almost 60 tackles last year. One of the things I really like about him isn't just that he catches the ball, he pass blocks. Patriots are going to love that. He's a tough kid. He's a captain. He reminded me of Kevin Falk when I was watching Notre Dame this year. I think he's probably a third, more likely a 4th round guy. Tyler Batty from Missouri, another one who's, small in the smaller size, right? 5'8", about 200 pounds. He was all SEC as a freshman. And then this year he was first team all SEC, led the SEC in rushing. I think he was 3rd in the country with 1,600 yards. And he's not a big kid, but he's quick inside. He even though he's, has that size that isn't, typical NFL size, he does a good job falling forward. I think his question mark is blocking, pass blocking, which is very important to the Patriots in their evaluation with third down backs is this person going to protect Mac? We don't want to stick him out there. And that's why Bolden was out there blocking on third down, right? Is you can trust Bolden out there. And now that Bolden's gone there, I think they really have a need here. Last guy I'll call out is Jerrion Ely from Ole Miss. I think he's all-purpose style player. When I was watching him, he had a little bit of Kadarius Toney, I felt, to him. Ole Miss found ways to kind of get Tony. The ball. And he didn't run the fastest time, but when you watch him in the game, he's moving by people. I see him definitely as a third down back, but worth noting, he was also drafted by Major League Baseball. I think he was like a picked by the D-backs, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a good player. I think he goes later in the 3rd round, unless some team kind of loves him, and that could happen. And the last kid won't go as deep, but Ty Chandler from Tennessee, from UNC, started his career at Tennessee.
Let's finish up here with quarterback. Okay. Kevin, you ready for this exercise? Okay. You ready for this? All right. I want a smart kid, quick decision maker. I want a quick release, decent enough arm, and I think I'm good with that. Who you got as a potential Patriots quarterback prospect?
So if we're going on your metrics, I would say Bailey Zapp from Western Kentucky. Good accuracy, quick release, better arm than I expected at the Senior Bowl. He's 6 feet, 215, so I'm not drafting.
Oof.
So, I want to, so I think the guy that the Patriots, look for anybody, and he might be there as a priority free agent. And this might just be the local guy that sticks with other local guys type thing. But that is EJ Perry. He's a kid from Andover.
Yep.
He was, Globe High School Player of the Year and set some records in Massachusetts. He went to BC and then wasn't playing, so he transferred to Brown. I think his uncle's head coach over at Brown. But the thing that hurt EJ is he played well in 2019, and then the Ivy League didn't play in 2020. Right. And so, he came back this year, had a good year, all Ivy. He was MVP of the Shrine Bowl. He's a natural leader. That's the word on him. He plays with good awareness. But with anything that you'd find in day 3, arm strength, not great, accuracy, not great, mechanics need work, et cetera. He had, Greg, this is going to make you say, but he had 27 INTs over the last 2 years that he played. So that's that, in
the Ivy League.
In the Ivy League, right? But I think that ideally, you get him in the camp and bet on his competitiveness and bet on some of his traits. He also ran a 4.65, and there could be an element like Hasselbeck back in the day when he was running special teams for BC before he became the quarterback for them, where he could try to do other things to make an NFL roster. I wouldn't necessarily put him like the kid from the Saints, but he's faster than you would expect.
I wonder if this Perry, look, it's a pretty common name, but like there's a guy who, and I'm not sure where he's now, but John Perry, who was a long-time Bill O'Brien confidant, has been with him all over the place. He's another Andover native. I would assume this is the same family. I think he also had a Brown connection. I did see him. He's on another coaching staff right now. I forget which one it is. I think he might be coaching college ball. But, the Perrys are very steeped in New England football. They've been, all over the place. And, yeah, I mean, that interception thing really kind of spooked me, but he does have, he might be at Sam Houston State. Yes, yeah.
I like the traits. I think at quarterbacks, it's the hardest traits to sometimes measure are the ones that are most important. And the word on Perry is he's got some of those, right? And so if you're looking for a priority free agent to bring someone to challenge Stidham, I really like that. One last guy I want to add, we're moving on to running back that I should have brought up that I have a biggie crush on, to use your wording, is Abram Smith from Baylor. Kid played linebacker, right? Last year before he became a running back this year. So he's, I look at him as like the potential Brandon Bolden replacement. He's not necessarily a third down back, but he's 5'11", 213, tough kid. That whole program said, this is the kid you want if you're in a battle. I thought he had better hands at the Senior Bowl I expected, but he had 1,600 yards rushing this year for Baylor. Averaged over 6 yards a carry. And 12 TDs. He was one of the best players on that team, and they ended up going to the Sugar Bowl. So he's a guy that he's a traits guy. When I was watching them, I was like, oh, Patriots are going to love this player.
Yeah. Well, let's get on to the BSJ member question of the day. If you have one, get on over there, $39.99 for the year. It's nothing. It's not even a cup of coffee a day. Plus, you got the Celtics are going into the playoffs. You have the Bruins going into the playoffs. You got the NFL draft. Kevin's doing his thing. My coach's film. You got the Red Sox going with Sean McAdam, who you have to read on the Patriots. So get your asses over there and subscribe already, and join us. And plus, you have the member Q&As and stuff like that. And by the way, we got to get Kevin up on another Q&A. Anything either that you heard from the readers, the listeners in the past couple of days since the podcast, anything you want to clean up or address or what have you?
Yeah, well, we had one in another Q&A, I think, given that we were talking about the receivers. One Dr. Doug had asked, Kevin, why have the Patriots been so bad at drafting wide receivers? Is it scouting level, management, Bill? When you see the number of wide receivers drafted at the Harry who made a positive impact, it makes me want to be sick. And so I would answer that, Doug, and to the other listeners is, I totally appreciate it as a fan. It is incredibly frustrating. There's so many good wideouts. Like, how can we not get one of them? Right. So I definitely appreciate it. I was talking to Gerard Mayo one time, and he said, he was sharing some perspective that I personally, as a fan, thought it was really valuable, which was, the Patriots offense is so much more complex for wide receivers than most of the other offenses in the NFL. It's coverage and read dependent, not to mention timing. So many of these guys have the physical skills, but it's difficult to get aligned previously with Tom or now with Mac, reading the coverage as it's evolving at the same time. And so there's lots of trust there, obviously football intelligence there, not to mention the quickness and being able to break off routes and things like that. So it's even been hard for vets that have come in and haven't been able to adjust, even though they have plenty of the athleticism and the experience. So it's a difficult evaluation given their offense. And I think that gave me more appreciation for why they haven't necessarily hit on some of these guys. Hopefully they get one in this draft and they are able to hit. But something that I think stuck with me after that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, and you can see it. I can see it on the practice field, even on the film with some of these young guys. Like, there's so much. Everything is dependent on what the defense is showing before the snap. It can change after the snap. You have to be on the same page with the quarterback. And so, like, you could see guys who are, not used to it or a little bit challenged, like basically thinking themselves through every play. And when you're thinking as a player, your feet really aren't moving and you're playing slower and it can be tough. It could definitely be tough. And I think you look at the receivers that have worked for them, especially the drafted guys like Deion Branch and David Givens. I remember doing a study about this topic, a long time ago, I think back in my Globe days. We were even talking about it back then. But those guys had very high Wonderlic scores. And I don't think, in some of the guys who didn't work out here, who you thought were going to work out here, not the highest Wonderlic scores. And to me, there's a very big correlation. Like, if I'm the Patriots, I'm looking at, first of all, I'm going to have a cutoff in terms of Wonderlic. And then, all right, get the best athlete in that group. Get the best athletes in that group and see what pops. To me, that has worked well for them. Kevin, I appreciate this. Safe travels. We will see you next week. He's Kevin Field, BSJ Draft Analyst. I'm Greg Bedard. This has been the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast.